The wind had begun to shift, the kind that carries the edge of seasons in it. Not yet autumn, but no longer summer either. Leaves rustled without letting go, and the air had a brittle quality, as though something unsaid was pressing just out of sight. At the edge of a quiet city park where the grass grew long because no one complained, and the bench faced nothing in particular, a woman sat crying. Not the dramatic kind of crying, not sobbing, just the slow, quiet unraveling that comes when the body forgets how to hold a weight any longer. Shoulders slack, head bowed, one hand clutched at something in her lap, maybe a photograph, maybe a letter, maybe nothing at all. She didn't seem to notice the squirrel rooting in the grass nearby, or the way the clouds were sinking lower than usual. Her jacket was far too thin for the coming chill. She looked like someone who had run out of decisions a few paces behind her. In the half-shadow where the trees thickened and the earth darkened with dampness, something moved. At first it might have seemed like the shifting of leaves or the bend of a low branch, but it wasn't wind, it had weight. A presence. It was the dog. Not large, not the kind that makes people nervous, more bones than muscle, with one ear standing and the other crumpled like soft paper. Gray along the muzzle, ribs visible under a patchy coat, tail curled not in fear but in caution. It had the look of something that had been watching people too long and had come to no firm conclusion about them. It didn't bark, didn't whine. It stood at the edge of the clearing watching the woman. Then, with a slowness that felt deliberate, it stepped forward, one paw, then another, and paused, head tilted, nose twitching, its body low to the ground as if unsure whether this moment was invitation or ambush. The woman didn't see it, or maybe she did and simply didn't care. The dog moved again, this time quicker, not toward her but around. Circling, its gaze never left her, but its movement was strange. Not the straightforward trot of a dog drawn by food or friendliness. There was a deliberateness to the path, a sort of pacing, as though it was measuring something, marking a boundary, trying to decide what, exactly, she was. A broken sob escaped her, sharp against the stillness. The dog stopped. Then something subtle shifted. The dog's hackles didn't rise, but its ears drew back and its body stiffened. It turned its head sharply, toward the path behind the bench. There was nothing there, not yet, but the dog's gaze locked on it unblinking. A jogger, perhaps, a gardener returning late, a man. The woman straightened slightly, instinctively wrapping her arms around herself, though her eyes remained fixed on the ground. The dog moved again, but this time it didn't approach her. It stepped between her and the path, planting itself directly in the space where someone might come. Its body was low, not aggressive but ready. Its legs were tense, tail down, ears up. It didn't growl, it just waited. The woman finally looked up, and for the first time her expression shifted. Confusion. First, the kind that arises when something breaks a pattern you hadn't realized you were relying on. Then something deeper. Not recognition exactly, but a flicker of memory, like she'd seen something like this once, long ago, and couldn't quite name it. She said nothing. The dog did not move. Somewhere behind the trees, a soft metallic clink rang out, chain or keys or something heavier, and then silence again. The wind stirred. For a long moment, the woman and the dog simply remained where they were, connected not by motion but by stillness. Neither made a sound, neither turned away. And then the dog took one step forward, just one. It didn't touch her, didn't bark or nuzzle or beg. It just stood close enough that its body cast a shadow across her hand, and in that brief overlapping of warmth and cool, light and shade, something ancient passed between them. Not language, not comfort, something quieter than both. Then the dog looked once more over its shoulder, toward the trees and the woman. Perhaps for the first time in hours, followed its gaze. What she saw or didn't see is not yet clear, but her hand, still trembling, slowly reached down and rested near the dog's paw, and the wind fell still. Her hand hovered near the dog's paw, just short of contact. The air between them felt charged, not in any dramatic sense, but like the pause before a decision is made. The dog didn't move, not closer, not away. It stood rooted, its body still turned partially toward the path, guarding something it didn't fully understand. Then came the sound again, fainter, this time, but real, not just keys. Footsteps, uneven, as if dragging. A faint metallic thud, maybe something in a cart, maybe something in a hand. The woman's hand dropped to the bench again. The dog tensed, its weight shifting almost imperceptibly forward. There was no growl, no bark, but its breath changed. Slower, measured, the kind of breathing an animal does when it's preparing itself. A figure emerged from the tree line, but not clearly. Just a silhouette, tall, bundled in a long coat too heavy for the weather, walking with a limp that made its steps unpredictable. It stopped when it saw them, just stood, watching. The woman didn't turn fully, but her body changed. The way her spine stiffened, the way her shoulders subtly collapsed inward. It wasn't fear, not exactly, but recognition, and not the kind people long for. The dog didn't move, though its head tilted to the side slightly. One paw lifted off the ground, but stayed in the air, suspended. The figure did not approach. After a long moment, it stepped backward, not out of fear but deliberately. One step, then another. then gone, but something lingered in the air after it vanished, like the scent of metal, or something rotting beneath the soil. It wasn't visible, but it was felt. Even the wind seemed to recoil. The trees stopped rustling. The woman closed her eyes. Not from relief. More like resignation. The dog sat, and in that stillness, the world tilted just slightly. She looked down at it then, really looked, took in the grime matted around its legs, the old scratches that hadn't healed cleanly, the notch torn clean from its ear, the small collar around its neck frayed and barely hanging on, long since stripped of name or tag. There was no telling who it had belonged to, or how long it had been alone, but it had the look of something that had once lived in a home and learned what happened when homes vanished. Her fingers twitched, the dog blinked slowly, then lay down, not like it was tired, but like it had decided this place, this woman, this bench, needed guarding. For a long while, they didn't move. The park around them began to shift in tone. A pair of sparrows flew low across the grass, startled. From a hedge, a distant siren faded into nothing. Somewhere behind them, a mother called to her child in a voice laced with annoyance, not fear. Life returned in fragments, but something had changed. The woman wiped her eyes roughly, not to hide the crying that was far past concealment, but more like brushing away dust from a window. She looked again toward the tree line, then away, and then she spoke. Quietly, "You don't know me." The dog didn't react. She let the words fall like broken stones. Not an invitation, not a confession, just an offering into the silence. "But maybe you know what it's like to be ... left behind." The dog's ears flicked at the sound, but it made no move. She reached into the inside pocket of her jacket, pulled out a small plastic bag, wrinkled and half-torn, and opened it. 2 dry biscuits. One crumbled completely, the other still mostly whole. She placed the larger one on the bench between them. The dog didn't lunge for it. It sniffed, then glanced up at her, then carefully took the biscuit and lay back down, holding it gently between its paws. It didn't eat right away. There was something ceremonial in that. The woman exhaled sharply, almost a laugh, but not laughter, more like disbelief. She looked toward the distant sidewalk where the figure had been, then back at the dog. "Are you staying?" The dog didn't answer, but it didn't leave. She leaned forward slightly, elbows on knees, head down, not in despair this time, but in thought, long, quiet thought. The kind people do when they realize something is cracked inside, and light is slowly trying to find its way through. Evening crept in gradually, not a dramatic descent, but the quiet withdrawal of color. Shadows stretched, not in threat, but in invitation. The first star blinked into being above the tree line, and somewhere, just beyond the reach of the lamplight, near the path where no one now walked, came the faint sound of something scratching softly at bark. The dog turned its head sharply toward it, ears forward. The woman did not, but her hand, very slowly, reached out and touched the dog's back. It was the first time she had touched anything all day. Her hand hovered near the dog's, paw not touching, not withdrawn. The space between them felt like a held breath. Around them, the wind had dropped entirely, as if the park itself were listening. The dog didn't move, but its eyes flicked again to the trees, ears pinned toward something that had not yet revealed itself. Its stance held protective, quiet, almost meditative, as though it had made a choice it could not explain and was now bracing for what might follow. The woman's eyes followed its line of sight, but whatever it had sensed was now buried behind a veil of leaves and shadow. Then came a sound, faint, rhythmic, not footsteps, wheels. The woman stiffened, her fingers curling reflexively over her lap. She didn't turn fully, but the motion of her shoulders betrayed something, a recognition, or maybe a memory she'd spent weeks avoiding. The dog leaned forward slightly. A low sound, not quite a growl, rumbled in its chest, so quiet it could have been mistaken for breath. Still, it did not lunge, did not bark. It simply watched. A man in a motorized scooter rolled into view, along the path, late 50s, maybe early 60s, with heavy shoulders and a face built to look apologetic even when silent. His hat sat crooked on his head, and his right hand shook just enough to make the joystick stutter as he steered. A canvas bag sat in the wire basket on the front of the scooter, a long-stemmed flower poking awkwardly from its side. He saw her, and stopped. The woman didn't look directly at him, but something in her face closed, not fear but the quiet armor of someone preparing to survive another conversation they hadn't asked for. Her hand drifted back to her lap. The dog, now standing rigid beside her, issued a sharp exhale through its nose. "I didn't think you'd come back here," the man said softly. The woman didn't answer. The bench beneath her creaked slightly as she shifted her weight, still not looking up. "I've been coming every week, just in case." She blinked once, slow, then looked down at her hands. No ring, no gesture. The dog turned its head toward her, then back to the man, tail down, body steady. It was not frightened, but it was watching the way wild things watch when they sense the mood of something just before it breaks. "I didn't bring her," he added, gesturing vaguely toward the scooter basket. "Didn't feel right. Still nothing. You had said this was your place, so I stayed clear, like you asked." The woman's throat moved, just once. She turned slightly then, not fully toward him, but enough for the early light to catch on the red in her eyes. Her voice, when it came, was small, brittle. "That dog isn't yours." "No," he said. "No, I don't think he is." Silence stretched. The only sound now was the whisper of dry leaves brushing together in the branches above. A cloud passed over the sun, softening the light into something more forgiving. The man shifted his weight on the scooter, hand twitching against the control. He didn't move forward. The dog, sensing this slight tremor of energy, stepped subtly closer to the woman, its body brushing her leg. Still, it didn't touch her. It just let her feel the heat of its presence. "I made mistakes," the man said. "Too many. But not that one. I never wanted it to end like that." "You left," she said, the words thin but steady. "I couldn't," he began, but didn't finish. The dog lifted its head suddenly, not toward either of them, but to the west. Its ears perked, body angled, scent catching on the breeze that had returned at last. A low gust moved through the trees, carrying with it something unfamiliar, not a smell exactly, but a change, a tension. The kind of air that presses before a storm or after a siren. Then, very faint, there came another sound, not mechanical, not human, a cry. The woman heard it too. Her head turned sharply, her brows knitting. She stood. So did the dog. The man remained frozen, uncertain. Another cry, closer now, hoarse, frightened, childlike but not a child. The woman took a single step toward the sound. The dog was already ahead of her, moving with urgency but no panic, a kind of practiced alertness. The animal's limp, subtle until now, became visible, the back right leg dragging ever so slightly. Old injury, older than the day. Yet it didn't hesitate. The woman hesitated, looked back at the man, then forward again. The dog had stopped just ahead, turned to face her, its eyes locked onto hers. And for a second, no longer she looked like she might cry again, but she did in single quotes. She followed. The man called her name. She didn't respond. The park was still, but the world had shifted. And somewhere, just out of sight, something waited, broken, lost, or perhaps trying to be found. The woman's hand hovered near the dog's paw, fingers curled slightly inward, as though unsure whether to offer or protect. The dog didn't move, it remained still, a living anchor between her and the shadows behind the bench. The shared silence held like a breath not yet released. Then the wind returned subtly at first, rustling the brittle leaves near the base of the bench, stirring the loose hairs along the dog's back. But there was something different in it now, not the softness of changing seasons, but a sharper edge. It carried with it the metallic scent of something disturbed, something wrong. The dog's head turned sharply again. It wasn't a flinch. It was focused, alert, trained. Whatever it had heard, it hadn't liked. Its body lowered just slightly, muscles pulling tighter, weight shifting forward. Still no bark, just that rigid, listening stillness. The woman noticed it this time. Her eyes tracked the dog's focus, but her own expression remained unreadable. Her lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came out. Then, quietly, just beneath the murmur of the wind came the sound of something moving in the underbrush, not the soft scatter of a squirrel. Heavier, slower, a drag or limp in the rhythm. Human. The dog stepped forward, closing the last inch between its paw and the woman's shoe. Its tail was low but steady. No fear, no submission, just readiness. The woman straightened, her spine uncurled. Not fully, but enough to suggest a decision had begun to form. Her fingers slowly moved, just barely brushing the dog's fur. A brief contact, but her eyes, they didn't leave the trees. Then, a figure. Not all at once, just a shadow threading through the trunks, hesitant, pausing, then moving again. Male, thin, jacket loose at the shoulders, a scarf hanging lopsided like it had been pulled in haste. His steps were wrong. Not drunk, but not sure. He wasn't trying to approach directly. He was circling a slow, wide arc that kept the trees between him and the bench. The woman saw him now, her jaw clenched, and her shoulders, which had finally started to loosen, pulled back. But her hand didn't move away from the dog. The dog's body pivoted subtly, placing itself more squarely in front of her now. It was reading the man like it would another predator, watching not just for aggression, but intention. Its nostrils flared once. Then again the man stopped. For a moment there was stillness again. A test. 3 forms caught in quiet tension. One watching, one hiding, one remembering. The woman stood, not quickly, not defiantly, but as though something in her could no longer stay seated. Her hand brushed the dog's neck in a quiet goodbye, or perhaps a request to wait. The dog didn't move, but its head followed her. She stepped forward into the clearing between the bench and the trees. The man exhaled audibly this time. His hands opened slightly, palms out, not in apology, in familiarity. "I didn't think you'd be here," he said. His voice was frayed at the edges. She didn't answer. "I came to return something." He reached slowly into his jacket, and the dog's front paw lifted a subtle warning, not a threat. The man stopped, then pulled out a small object and let it fall into the grass between them. The sound it made was too soft to name, but the woman's eyes went to it immediately. A key, small, worn. The man stepped back. "I'll leave now," He turned dot, and for a moment it seemed that was it, that whatever history hung between them had been distilled to that quiet exchange and now would pass, like so many others do, into the silence of not quite closure. But then the woman called it on, not a name but a single word. Why? The man paused. He didn't turn, didn't answer, but his shoulders sank and his hands dropped to his sides. Then he walked away, not fast, not slow, and disappeared into the trees once more. That the dog approached the spot where the key had landed. It sniffed once, then looked up at the woman, not waiting for instruction, just watching. She stared at the small, rusted key lying in the grass, and the breeze returned, gentle again, but persistent, lifting her hair slightly, nudging the dry leaves toward the path. She picked up the key. The dog turned and walked ahead, not with urgency, but with certainty, as though it somehow knew which path she'd choose, and for the first time since she'd arrived. The woman followed, not toward home, not yet, but toward whatever came next. She didn't ask where the dog was going. She didn't need to. Its pace was steady, measured, not eager, not lost, just forward, as though it wasn't leading her, but inviting her to walk beside something older than direction. The path veered left, skirting the pond where the water had turned still and opaque, a mirror to the low clouds hanging without movement. The reeds brushed together in soft clicks, and the sound of the world narrowed. No voices, no distant engines, only the dog's footfalls and her own. The key sat heavy in her coat pocket. She hadn't looked at it again. For a time, they walked, without aim, not away, not toward, just through. The old trees thickened, shadows stretching as the light thinned. She began to notice things she hadn't seen in a long while. The way bark peeled from certain trunks like tired parchment, the scratch of dry ivy against the fence, the faint scent of earth, not rot, but time. The dog paused near a broken tree stump, nose lifted to the breeze. Then, as if making a choice, it turned slightly off the main path and pushed through a space in the underbrush. She hesitated, then followed. It wasn't far, just a few steps. The space opened into a small clearing, forgotten, perhaps once part of an older trail. And there, in the dappled light, stood an iron gate, half swallowed by thorn and moss. Beyond it, a cottage barely visible through the years of neglect. The shutters hung askew, the roofline sagged, but the front door still stood, pale blue beneath the dust. She froze. The dog sat at the edge of the clearing. It didn't go closer, it didn't need to. It simply watched her, not pushing, not pleading, just waiting. Her breath caught, and her hand found the key again. She stepped forward, slowly, each movement careful, deliberate. The air smelled different here, old wood, dry stone, something like lavender under the rot. Her fingers trembled. As they reached for the rusted latch, the key slid in almost too easily. It turned. The door creaked open. Inside was dust, silence, and memory. She didn't step inside. She only stood there, the air brushing past her face, stirring the fine hairs on her arms. Her eyes moved across what little she could see: the edge of a chair, the glint of a broken picture frame, a single boot near the threshold. Behind her, the dog exhaled. She turned back. The dog was no longer sitting. It had stood, not in alarm, but readiness, the way old souls do when their part in a story has ended. Its eyes met hers, soft, unblinking. Then, without sound, it turned away and began to walk back the way it came. She didn't call after it. She just watched. The wind picked up, gently lifting a curl of dust from the floor inside the doorway. She stepped back, closed the door, and sat on the stone step outside, not crying now, just quiet. And somewhere down the path where the dog had vanished into the trees, a single paw print remained pressed in the soft earth.